Guys, what's going on? It is your boy Derek here of DH Music with my first of hopefully several videos where I go over the amazing Line 6 POD Go. I am so excited about this unit. I've been a POD user for over a decade now, and it's just amazing to see how the technology has improved from the POD XT Live that I started out with when I first started playing guitar all the way to this amazing unit at my feet today. So just give you a little bit of background on myself. Like I said, I've been a POD user for a long time, and actually the reason I kind of gravitated towards POD is I grew up playing in church, and I still play in church to this day. And you know, at the church I go to, it was pretty actively encouraged to use some kind of direct solution when it comes to guitar tones. We've used amps on stage in the past, and it was a little bit of a nightmare. So I've always played through a POD or some kind of digital modeling unit. It's mostly been made by Line 6. So, I mean, you do the math. I play guitar in church. I play through a POD. I happen to have a lovely Shoreline Gold strap that just so happens to have Dimarzio pickups in it. Area 58 in the neck and middle, 61 on the bridge, to be exact. You do the math, and you can probably tell that I'm a little bit of a fan of Lincoln Brewster. I'm a huge fan of Lincoln Brewster, I should just be honest. I love his music. I love his playing. He's, without a doubt, my favorite guitar player. Had the biggest influence on me than probably anyone else. And so, you know, naturally, you know, being a praise and worship guitar player, I gravitate towards his music and also, you know, towards his tone. Because something that was I always thought was really cool and unique about Lincoln is he used a POD. You know, we listen to guys like amazing guitar players like Nigel Hendroff and the guys from Hillsong and Bethel, and all these great guitar players have these great tones. Well, they're using you know thousands of dollars worth of pedals and boutique amps and everything, whereas Lincoln Brewster had a tone that I thought was better. For my own personal taste, he was obviously an amazing player, and he got it out of a $300 or $400 POD, and I always love that. So every unit I've ever had, whether it be Line 6, Atomic Amplifier, Boss GT series, any unit that I get, I judge it based on not how good the Vox amp models are, or how good the effects are necessarily. Those are important. But the first thing I try to nail is the Lincoln Brewster tone, or at least something similar to that. And so naturally, you know, now that I have this beautiful POD Go here, I wanted to see how close we can get. So I want to give a little bit of background on what we're going to be working with today, just so you kind of know what to expect. So I'm going for like the pre-real life tone, like his real life album, because from his very first self-titled record all the way till real life, he used some kind of POD unit on his recording. Now, he used a POD a little bit on the real life record, but I think most of that was like an Axe effects and some plugins, and he's kind of gone back and forth on a couple different units. But I'm mainly focusing on his POD XT, X3 era of tone. He himself has gone on record to say that that's when he thought his tone was at its best. You know, he used an HD 500 for a while, and he has said in an interview before, and he said in several interviews that he actually preferred the tone from the XT and X3 lives. Mainly the Plexivariac amp model. So what I've got here is actually a Firehawk Fx, Line 6 Firehawk Fx, which is basically, I need to do a series of videos on it as well, because it's basically like greatest hits of POD. It's got the HD stuff, it's got the X3 stuff. It's a really great unit, and it was actually my main rig until I got the POD Go. So Lincoln's tone is kind of centered around that Plexivariac amp model, which is a really special amp model, if you ask me. By the way, Line 6, if you were watching this, if someone from Line 6 is watching this, what a great idea for a firmware update to be able to, you know, have some legacy amp models, or, you know, I don't even care if you do legacy amp models. Just include like an SL68, you know, Sir SL68, or who knows, maybe even model that Plexivariac that you used for the old XT model back in the day. If you still have access to it, that'd be amazing, because that's a truly special amp model. And I'll be honest, it's really hard to recreate that sound with just about any other unit. But I think I've dialed up something that's pretty close to the original tone on the POD Go. So if you want to join me, let's go check it out. So let's go back over to POD Go, the POD Go edit, and see what we've got set up to try to match the tone of the Firehawk. Alright, so here we are at POD Go. So how I've got this set up is Snapshot 4 is, you can hear a little bit of the hiss from the Firehawk. This is, again, the Plexi Lead 18B patch, and it sounds like this. Oh, gotta have the guitar up. And then here it is in the POD Go. Alright, so pretty close. Obviously, you'll have to make some tweaks to match your guitar, but we can kind of go over the settings and see what we're working with here. So, the POD Go, the Helix series, does not have the Plexi Variac amp model in it, which is a real shame because that's a great sounding amp model. But I found that the Plexi Bright, the Brit Plexi Bright, was actually pretty close. It doesn't have near the gain range that the Variac had, so I had to crank the gain up a little bit. Like on the Plexi Variac, the gain's about halfway, a little over halfway, whereas on this we had to really get it up there to about 8. Bass is about the same. Mids, treble. The mids are up quite a bit. That's a thing you might find works really nicely on these Plexis. I'm actually going to bring this treble up just a little bit, just because it was a little on the dark side. I think on the original POD X3 patch, the treble was about all the way up. So we'll kind of see what that sounds like. So not bad. Just gives a little bit more clarity to the tone. Presence at 8.5. You notice some of these have snapshots attached to them. I'll explain that in a moment. Channel volume you kind of adjust to taste. I do have this assigned to a foot switch for a solo boost. Again, we'll get to that in a minute. Master I had at 10. I found it felt best at that. The sag really affects more the feel than the tone. We can kind of mess with it and see. So I have the sag at 50, or at 5, so we'll kind of see what that sounds like. It doesn't make you play better, I can tell you that. So we'll turn the sag all the way down. Sag all the way up. So you kind of adjust it to taste. I found it felt alright at 5. But again, you can kind of adjust that to taste. I turned the hum and the ripple down because that's absolutely useless. That's not useless, but I'm not trying to recreate like Led Zeppelin, old, 70s rock with the humming and buzzing amps. So we can get rid of it as much of that as possible. Bias and bias excursion I have down all the way. So in trying to mimic the feel of the Variac, which I don't know much about the original amp, but thinking about the Variac, it brought down the voltage of the amp, I believe. Pardon my ignorance. I just found that it was a lot closer with the bias and bias excursion at 0, but we'll kind of mess with it. So here's the bias, and I'll go ahead and bring the bias excursion at 5 and see what that sounds like. Turn it all the way up. And back down to 0 where I had it. I don't know. I just kind of like the way that sounded. So let's go over to the cab model here. We had to make a pretty significant change here. You notice I have that high cut way down. I can actually probably bring that down a little bit more just because it's a very bright sounding amp, and Lincoln's tone is not very bright at all. It's actually pretty dark when you listen to it. It sits really well in the mix, but it's a pretty dark sound. And he used the 57 on axis. Well, actually, something kind of funny about that. So, in the original POD series, they actually had it mislabeled. So I've heard. So the 57 on axis was actually the 57 off axis, which is kind of funny. Whereas in the POD Go, they finally fixed that, and the 57 dynamic is actually on axis. And I'm not a huge fan of the tone, but it sounds like this. Now, I'll say this. If you have a very dense mix in your band, that might be a pretty good one to work with. But I think most people aren't a huge fan of that particular mic model in here. And by the way, you could use an IR and it would probably sound better. And we might mess with some IRs later on in the video if we have time. But I was really trying to get it to where everyone could use this patch. So if you don't have the same IRs I have, you should be able to get about the same sound. The 121 Ribbon's another nice mic. It's a little dark, a little bassy, but you know, who knows? You might like that. Got a lot of bass with that one. Probably a little too much. I think that's right. It's set the 414 condenser. 84. That is a 67. A little sloppy today. 87. 47. And 112 dynamic. I think we're pretty much going to be sticking around with these condensers. So I kind of like the 414. To me, it was the more balanced. But mess around with these mic models because you'd be surprised that if you've never experimented with that before, how much of a difference the mic model can make. Of course, you can mess around with the distance. That's 1 inch off the cab. Bring it back to 2 inches makes a huge difference. So here it is back at 1. Back to 2. Bring that back to 6 inches. Let's see, how far can we go? 12 inches. So you can really experiment with that. I kind of liked it closed mic'd. So let's kind of go back to our reference tone for a second. So here's the POD Go. And here's the Firehawk. So obviously there's differences in the tone. And you can kind of tweak to match your guitar a little bit better in your setup, but I'm pretty happy with how close this is getting. But this is the secret right here, the parametric EQ. So Lincoln uses a very very odd EQ curve on his patches. Not necessarily odd, I call it like a tube screamer curve. It kind of has a little bit of bass roll off, this really prominent mid hump, and then a high roll off. So we try to kind of match that here. I think on the original pod it's a semi-parametric EQ, whereas this is actually a parametric EQ. You can kind of check those settings. I'm happy with where they're at, so I'm not going to sweep them. But yeah, so 4.5 dB boost at 400 hertz. And then you got a 3.1 dB boost at 755 hertz. High frequency We've got rolling off at 3.1K at about 1.2 dB off. No low cut. This isn't a very boomy sound, at least not to my ears personally. High cut I brought down to 10. You can experiment with that. Because I've got the cabinet rolling off at 5, I don't really think that high cut's really doing much of anything. I just kind of instinctively bring that down. The delay, I'm just using a simple digital delay. You can obviously substitute whatever delay you want. I'm just kind of trying to get the basic tone together. So what I'd like to do now is actually do a playing example of these tones in context. So I'm going to play the solo from All To You. So I'm going to be going between the POD Go and the Firehawk, just so you can see the tone, what kind of tones we're getting, and hopefully see for yourself how much of a difference it makes. And if you like the tone that we've got, I will have this available for custom tone. But let's hear it, and then we'll talk about some cool stuff you can do with the Snapshots. Through that example, my sloppy playing aside, you're able to hear that, especially in a band context, the tones are very, very similar. And I'll be completely honest with you. My comfort zone lies within the Firehawk, but to me, tone-wise, I felt like I really like the tone of the POD Go, actually more than the Firehawk, which is good. It's supposed to be an upgrade. I feel like the amp models are much better, much more dynamic. Overall, the tone and everything, it felt like it had a lot more presence, a lot more bite. I actually thought it fit in the mix a little bit better than the Firehawk. That's just my own personal preference. Hopefully you guys feel the same way. So before I let you go, I wanted to show you some snapshots and kind of show you how I'm using those. So for those of you that are familiar with Lincoln Brewster's one-on-one DVDs that he did a while back, basically where he kind of went over different parts from his songs and everything. I think I should probably go back and learn some of those solos, but he went through his pod patches. And so what I did was basically turn these snapshots into his 4 main pod patches. Now, this does not include his patch 16C, which is his volume swell patch, but it does include his main lead patches. So snapshot 1 is essentially 18B. That's the one you've been hearing basically this whole time. So, and with that, if you go in pedal board mode, foot switch, I guess that'd be foot switch 1 is the boost comp. which kind of sounds like this. Kind of gives you a little bit of a boost. Then you have the tube drive. You'll see that come up in another preset. And then if you've got another pedal that you want to include, I've got the effects loop. I'm not going to kick that on because that would put the POD Go in series with the Firehawk, and that'd be a lot. So we're not going to do that. Then the foot switch, I believe that would be foot switch 4. I think about that for a second. Foot switch 4 is going to be a channel volume boost. So here it is without it. So just a little bit of a boost for solos, and you have the delay and the reverb on the next 2 foot switches. So let's kind of go through these snapshots. So you got 18B, which is kind of his main tone. And then you go to snapshot 2, and you'll notice some of the amp settings changed and also kicked in a reverb. So this is modeling his 18C patch, which is his more cleaner, something like this. So that's basically that patch. And then snapshot 3 is going to be based on, I believe it's 17C. Basically the same thing as 18B, but the delay changed. Kind of go to these delay settings so you can see the difference there. So here it is in snapshot 1. The standard quarter note delay. The mix looks high, but on this particular preset, or on this particular delay model, I think 100% is the same thing as mix at 50. I don't know, but I found you have to ride the mix pretty high on this one. Then when you go to snapshot 3, it switches to a dotted 8th note, and the mix comes up quite a bit. So, and you can use that for, I think he uses that for the rhythm part on Let the Praises Ring. So, and obviously if you're playing praise and worship music, that dotted 8th note sound will come in handy. And you can use it, I guess you can pair it with some other effects. Let's turn on the reverb, and you can use it for other praise and worship songs. So that tempo is a little fast for that, but you can obviously mess around with that patch if you like. Then preset 4, or snapshot 4, is modeled after his 18D preset, which is again the same amp model and everything from 18B. But this includes the Chandler tube driver, which he uses for the lead on Let the Praises Ring, and I haven't played that in a while. Let's see if I can still play that solo. Apparently not. Something like that. So I haven't played that solo in a while. It's been a while since we've done that song, but basically you guys get the idea. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this patch. Hopefully this was helpful to you. I'm actually very pleased with how this turned out. I was kind of curious of how this preset would work, not having the same amp model, but honestly I'm very happy with this tone. I'm sure I'll come up with other variations. We might even tackle tones similar to that he got from his POD HD rig, which I believe he used the Park 75 model. So definitely a lot of cool things we can do with this POD Go. I'm very happy with the tones we're getting so far. So hopefully you guys like this. I will include a link to this in the custom tone, assuming custom tone is up. I believe it is. If not, check back later. I'm sure it'll be up again at some point. But guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. If there's any other things you would like to see me go over with the POD Go, or any other like Lincoln Brewster solos you would like to see me cover, I promise I'll practice them and get them as clean as possible. But yeah, I'm very happy with this. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you know every time I go live. This has been me. I'm still trying to figure out an outro. Thank you guys for watching. Y'all have a blessed day.